So in this video, we're going to look at using rigid body dynamics with MoGraph clones. So let's start off with a floor. So create environment floor, and we want this again to be our collider body. So let's select our floor, go to our tags, and add a collider body onto the floor. Next thing I'm going to do is create a clone object, and I'm just going to use a plain cube for this one. And let's make a cloner to put that cube into. So MoGraph cloner, and let's just drag and drop that cube into the cloner. Okay, so as we can see in the usual cloning situation, we've got 3 clones stacked on top of each other. I actually want a big array of clones, so let's change our cloner from a linear clone to a grid array of clones. I'm going to put 4 clones in each direction, X, Y, and Z. So I've got a 4 by 4 by 4 array of clones. And let's just put some space in between each of these cubes in my clone object. And let's just grab that cloner and move it upwards so it's up above the floor. Okay, and if I hit play here, nothing will happen because we have no rigid bodies on the clones yet. Okay, so there's 2 ways that we can set up rigid body dynamics on the MoGraph system. So one is to just put a rigid body tag on the cube itself. This is the object that gets cloned by the cloner, so any tags on this will also be cloned. So let's try that for a starter and see if that works. So I'm going to select that cube, go to tags, simulation tags, add a rigid body, and let's hit play and see what happens. So that's falling, and then all the individual clones bounce off each other and fall apart, which is what we'd expect to see. So that's great. So that works just fine. So there's nothing wrong with doing that to create clones with rigid body dynamics. So let's have a look at another way that we can do it, which gives us a different option as well for how our clones work. So I'm just going to delete the tag off the cube. I'm going to select my cloner, and let's add a rigid body tag to the cloner itself. Okay, so there's an interesting setting that we can adjust here. First of all, let's just hit play and see what happens. So the clone system falls, and again, all the clones are being treated as individual rigid body objects, and they're doing what we'd expect them to do. So that's great. What we can also do, if we have a look at the tag that's on the cloner, if we go to the collision tab, we can have a look at the top couple of settings here. The most important one here is this individual elements setting. This is telling Cinema 4 if all the individual clones are unique rigid bodies or if they're not. So what we can do if we want to, we can set that to off, and this whole clone object acts like one rigid body. So if I hit play, it falls and bounces a very small amount, like a cube. So if I grab my cloner, I'm just go back to frame 0, grab my rotate tool and just spin it over on its point. And if I hit play again, we'll just see this a little better. I might just give myself a few more frames here on my timeline. So if I hit play now, and we can see this clone system is being treated as one big rigid body object. And as I said before, if we go to its dynamics tag, that's this individual settings function here. So that's fine. Let's just give ourselves a little bit more bounce on this rigid body. I just want to get a bit more movement out of this for this example. Let's make it fairly bouncy. And let's just have a look at that. Okay, so the interesting thing about this setting here is that it's keyframeable. Any function in Cinema 4D that has this little circle dot next to it, that can be keyframed. So what we can do is we can have a system of clones that bounce and collide with other objects as a single object, and then at some point in time it falls into its component clones. So that an easiest way to do that is just to keyframe when we want that to happen. So I'm just going to have a play through this animation. So I'm going to say, let's stay together, and about frame 110, let's have it all fly into its individual pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scrub forward to frame 110, and under the individual elements, I'm going to keyframe it. And then the following frame, I'm going to set that to animate or to use all the individual elements as rigid bodies and keyframe that. And so it should bounce a bit and then collapse into pieces. So there it is bouncing, and then there it falls apart. So this rigid body tag on the cloner object rather than on the individual clone gives us a little bit of extra options for how we want our rigid bodies to animate or to work over time. So that's quite a useful tip to know about.